Welcome everyone to another week and another episode of the None of Our Businesses YouTube show and podcast, where we, three accountants, talk about the news and business from accountants' perspectives. And with me today is Charlie Zygmunt.
Hi, everybody.
And Jack DiMatteo. Well, what are we going to talk about today? If you are contemplating a job change, what kind of financial planning are you doing for that? And a French company is creating a market for buying and selling used and refurbished electronics. I would love to see that, and because I've got a lot of that kind of stuff. The world is running out of, and there are shortages of, wait for it, everything. Bitcoin is down after Elon reverses course on Tesla accepting crypto as payment. And finally, from Accounting Today, the Treasury is proposing crypto transactions over 10K be reported. All right, well, with that, we're going to get into it, and I will invite you all, as always, to comment, send us your notes, thoughts, questions, complaints, all of that. Put it in the comments on the YouTube channel. Give us a rating in your podcast, however you're listening to podcasts. Please subscribe, like, and share this with your friends so we can keep growing this for you and the rest of the community out there. And yeah, let's take it away. Hey, Jack, what do you got?
Yes, started off this week, financing your job change, planning for a job change. That was kind of interesting. When I saw this article, I thought something different. And then I walked through there and they were, I'm not sure most job changes are really, that much of a financial, burden. I mean, if you're basically staying in the same field, the similar salary level, parallel moves, even a promotion, but, kind of what I read into the article, they really didn't delve into it. So I guess I'm going to, because it's where my thoughts went, because I've seen this. You'll hear a lot of people talk about making not just a job change, but a career change. And a lot of times that's where I see it come with financial ramifications, because oftentimes, going very experienced in this field to a field where you're not so experienced, then your pay is going to reflect that. And that's where I would think somebody would really have to kind of prepare for that financial impact. The other thing I like in it too is the people that go out and hang their own shingle. Now, they might be a great electrician, accountant, whatever the case may be, but my caution to those people is, do you have a sales plan in place? Because just because you're a great accountant or electrician does not mean on day one you're going to have clients and customers paying your bills. So, that would be another situation where you're going to have that ramp up. So, I think most job changes don't necessarily require a whole lot of financial planning, but I think if you're making a career change, and especially if you're making it to where your pay is going to take a severe hit, I think you do have to plan for the fact that you're not going to be at that income level, initially, and that you do have to figure out a way on how you're going to bridge that gap. I'm not sure if you guys read that much into the article, but I'd kind of like to hear your take.
Yeah, I can kind of throw in there scenarios where I've seen financial planning for our peers happen, particularly, and I think this is true for other people in other disciplines, but particularly if you're in the executive ranks, and we see this with finance too, is that often you've got a lot of your finances wrapped up with the business that you're in, right? You've got stock options and you've got opportunities there that you're probably you're either foregoing or you vested and you're doing some calculations on that. And so I think it's pretty common in my world for people to be kind of running their spreadsheets and doing their financial planning of, okay, what's the exact date that makes sense that I could leave in terms of when do bonuses get paid, when do stock options vest, do I care about the stock options? When I exit, I may have to pay money in to exercise the options immediately and buy stock in the company, and it's still a private company, and I don't know if I even want to do that. And so I see a lot of those kinds of discussions and thoughts kind of permeating the job switch at the executive level for sure. The executive level, particularly in private companies, the public companies, they have some of that too. But sometimes it's a little easier in public companies because you may have stock or you may have executive comp, and it's more regulated. It's more kind of streamlined for you, and so there's a more obvious path of how you exit in that case. So yeah, I'd throw in there that yeah, it's definitely something that we do see in certain fields and with certain job categories that switching the job is there is some financial planning that goes along with it more than even just, oh, I'm going to give up this salary for a different salary kind of thing. And then you got the folks, the high paid folks that they're not really switching jobs. They're leaving a job with the anticipation they'll get another job later, but they're going to take a sabbatical or they're going to take a break for a while or whatever, right? And so of course there's financial planning that goes into that in terms of, if I'm going to take a year off work, can I afford that? And what does that look like? And certainly have seen that with many colleagues as well. I haven't personally had an opportunity to do that exact thing. I've certainly left to start my own thing and build my own business. And of course, there's lots of financial planning involved in that as well. So yeah, just thought I'd throw out there some scenarios where for sure financial planning comes into the mix when you're making a change like that.
Yeah, I think you guys both bring up really good points. And I just want to kind of elaborate on Jack's point about if you're switching careers at the same time as switching jobs. I think you add in a lot of extra variables of not only are you kind of restarting on the ladder of that career path, but then it's a new career path to you as well. So your personal success in that ladder is not necessarily the same as it may have been in the last place that you worked or in the last field that you worked in. So I think it adds a lot of uncertainty, but it can also add a lot of potential as well, especially if you're switching from something that is maybe a less secure industry to something that is more in demand. Then it can make it worthwhile. But yeah, it seems like there's a lot of financial planning involved in that switch. And the more that you can line up your ducks in a row, I think it just sets you up better to be prepared for that. But yeah, something a lot of people are going through right now. So I found another article we can talk about in TechCrunch called Back Market raises $335 million for its refurbished device marketplace, which is now valued at $3.2 billion. And so what this article is looking at is a French company that is making a marketplace where people can buy and sell refurbished electronics. And it's part of what they're calling the circular economy, where different industries are trying to reuse and recycle and make products available across a wider period of time rather than just on their initial release. And it doesn't refurbish the devices directly. It works with third parties as for sourcing those materials. I want to get you guys' take on whether or not you can foresee this circular economy or this like refurbished market being the next big thing, or is this just one of those sort of fads of somebody trying to optimize something that really had a minor part in the market in the first place? What do you guys think?
Well, it's funny. I mean, you've got a heck of a lot of devices. I mean, rather than go. I mean, there's everybody here in the United States gets the latest and greatest of everything. But I mean, I've heard forever that these refurbished products have markets all over the world, and some of the the countries that are not the United States, where people will move heaven and earth to buy the latest device, and damn the torpedoes, that's what they're going to do. So I mean, to me it's obviously it's viable. And I think you've got a lot of other places around the world where, 2 or 3 generations back on some of these devices, it's still a whole lot better than what they have now. So I think there is a heck of a market in refurbishing. I'm not sure it'll be a big player in a nation like ours, but I think, when you start looking at that worldwide, I think it definitely has a place in the market.
I mean, I love the idea. Somebody who I'm a little bit of a tech nerd, and I like to get the latest and greatest of the things that I'm into. It's not across the board, but I follow the Samsung products, so I get the latest and greatest Samsung phone when I can, and I have certain things like that I follow, and I always try to maintain updated. And what I found over the years, and I update my computers every few years or so, and what I found over years is that I accumulate a lot of this stuff, and there doesn't seem to be great options for recycling it or unloading it in a cost-effective way. It's weird because it's like years. I mean, it's like it ebbs and flows. It's like in some years there'll be good programs out there, maybe from the phone company or whatever, to recycle a device and get some discount on, and the next year there isn't a good program for it. And so, over the last 5 years or more, I'd say, yeah, it's kind of been hit or miss, and I end up with just this kind of hodgepodge of old electronics laying around. And I know I I know I can go give that away, and that'd be a good thing to do. So I should probably do that. But yeah, I like this idea of having this marketplace where things can be refurbished and then sold on and used.
Yeah, I think it's exciting just because, you have mass production and you're making things. And a lot of times there's a known issue that isn't found out until they get so far along in the production. So you end up with all of these devices with something easy to fix to somebody else. They just need to be properly worked on and, made available. All right. Do you have another article we can talk about, Jack?
I sure do. Guess what? The world is running out of everything. So a lot of these companies were reticent to go into production, obviously, when the whole world was shut down and the starts and stops throughout COVID. And all of a sudden, it just seemed like the floodgates opened, and they've been chasing ever since to try to keep up with demand, and they haven't been able to do it. So you're seeing shortages. And if you read the article, I mean, just about every category is represented. I think the ones that you hear about, the most, a lot of the construction supplies, and that's kind of slowing down housing and things, but there's food in there and everything else. But, it's kind of dovetails into something else we've talked about on this podcast before, what's going on with inflation. Well, it's pretty obvious what's going to go on here. You've got too much money chasing too few availability. It's going to drive the prices up. So I think a lot of what's going on with these shortages and a lot of key materials, food. I mean, that's just, if you read the article, it pretty much covers every category. Obviously that's going to start driving inflation as people start flocking to get what's left out there. It's interesting. I talk to contractors a lot, and, they used to say you'd go into that infamous aisle that would have all the electrical boxes at Home Depot, and there'd be, electrical boxes as far as the eye could see. You go into that aisle now and they don't have a single one on the shelf, which is kind of strange. And from what my conversation with contractors is you better get there early in the morning, the Home Depot and the Lowe's, because a lot of the key things that you want, they're probably going to sell out of them right away. So, I think we're kind of already seeing this. So I guess this article doesn't come as a shock to me, but what's your take on what the longer term ramifications are of this?
Yeah, I think it depends on whether demand is being artificially stimulated, right? If, which is what we suspect with the stimulus, that that people are buying more stuff that they might otherwise not buy, and that ultimately is reducing supplies. But there was also supply chain problems. So it's hard to know, like, is it really the case that there's artificial demand creating artificial shortages, which is then spurring inflation? That would obviously not be a good thing. But if there's real demand and or some supply shortages that are increasing prices temporarily, I think that is the ebb and flow of supply and demand. I wouldn't necessarily be afraid of that. As a practical, in the natural order of things, as populations grow and there's more human beings and people are doing better and they're buying more things, and that leads to higher demand, and that all leads to higher prices of things. I don't think we should be afraid of that scenario when it's coming about as a result of the natural order of things. I think, as we hit on this show before, what underlies a lot of the concern about what people are seeing here is that it doesn't feel like the natural order of things. It feels like there's an artificial hand at work causing this to some extent. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's a little bit beyond my economic know-how to fully grasp what is happening and what will happen. So I leave it to others. But that's just kind of my armchair observations on this.
Well, I don't know that I can provide any economic knowledge that isn't already here at the table, but what I would say is that the one thing I've noticed is that, the price of gas has gone through the roof recently. And I know that the price of oil has indirect impact on the price of a lot of other products. And that then can drive issues with availability as things are more complicated or costly to produce. And so I could see how unrelated things, or I should say semi-related factors like that, could then lead to shortages of things that you wouldn't think would be affected. So I think it's one of those very, I don't want to say insidious, but very hard to kind of see coming underlying issues. And so, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. I think we'll continue to have these issues for quite some time. And I think to some extent we'll change our ways in terms of what we buy or how we produce to account for those constrained resources. But I think on some things that's just not an option because the item is what it is and there isn't a new, better way to do it cheaper. So kind of see how that all plays out. I've got another article we can talk about from CNN Business called Bitcoin plunges 12% after Elon Musk tweets that Tesla will not accept it as payment. And so this is from about a week ago, but it has continued to plunge since then. So I thought it would still be relevant to kind of talk about. And I think it's interesting because you hear a lot of hype about these cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin and things like that. And you don't always hear as much about the negative side or the downside. One of the things he brings up is that the environmental cost of mining it causes it to be so expensive to the world to produce that then makes it a terrible currency. And so I guess, yeah, I just want to get your guys' take on that. Do you know, in the discussions of Bitcoin or of these other cryptocurrencies, do you ever hear a lot of talk about the impact of it outside of its usage? Because we're always talking about, you know, who takes it, who doesn't take it, but you never hear, oh, these are the things that it isn't the best at. So I want to get your guys' take on that. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know what to think about Elon's reversal of position here, because this issue that he's referring to has been well known, that Bitcoin farming or crypto farming, you know, it requires having servers, and you've got organizers, schemers who have put together businesses, I suppose you can call them, who put together, you know, farms of servers. And, you know, you put a bunch of servers in a room and you're obviously taking some energy there, but I don't think that's where all the energy draw is. I think a lot of it is in keeping that thing from burning down. It's like the keeping it cool and everything is part of the big deal. And some of the places where there's like wide open land with energy to put farms are not the coolest places on earth. Like, I think they've been doing this in like the deserts of Nevada and stuff like that. So I think, yeah, I mean, I think that is a real thing, is that it's like, well, you would think a virtual currency is like the new age and somehow more environmentally friendly than printing currency on paper and ink and chemicals and everything involved in that, right? But yeah, I think there has been a concern over the environmental impact. But I would just call Elon out on this, because the idea that he suddenly just became aware of the environmental impact just seems kind of fanciful to me. I mean, we're to believe that the guy who's hyped as the smartest man in the universe and going to lead our business community and our culture into the next generation just suddenly found out that cryptocurrency has an environmental impact to it related to this. You know, there's something weird here about the fact that he basically propped up the crypto market months ago by saying that Tesla was looking at accepting it, and then pulls the rug out from under it with this kind of sudden revelation that there is environmental issues involved. I don't buy. I think he's either playing a game or he's not as plugged into things as people think he is.
Yeah, I don't know. I think on some level, I think he just has fun being relevant and being able to move markets like this, because he's done it. He's done it on other things, but it just seems like, you know, who knows how long it's going to take with Bitcoin. I think at some point it's probably going to get to mainstream, but I think that journey to get to mainstream, it's going to be a lot of fits and starts and things like this. It's funny you talk about it dropping, Charlie. I think it was just this morning I was watching a channel and they had some analyst on there that was talking about it going to 500,000. So it's you know, it just depends on who you're talking to that day and what time of the day. But I think Elon is flexing his muscle a little bit and probably has a little bit of fun with it, because when he talks, people seem to listen. He gets a reaction. But, you know, I'm where you are, Ty. Yeah, I would have a hard time believing that he just stumbled onto this new information as we speak. But, that's what's really kind of crazy about these things. You don't think of the unintended consequences. You just think things are virtual. Well, it still takes some kind of horsepower or some kind of system to run things even virtually. And in this case, you've got these massive server farms, but maybe that's why they try and do them in Russia and Siberia. I guess you got to worry about them freezing. It's not keeping them cold. You got to probably keep them from freezing if you have them in Siberia, but they do have a lot of land there. But yeah, it's interesting. And I like I said, I think until Bitcoin goes mainstream, I mean, you're just these stories, they'll resurface every other week. It'll be some other extravagant reason for it to swing wildly like it does.
Even when Elon Musk says something about Bitcoin specifically, all of the other related currencies like Ethereum and Dogecoin and all these other ones that he didn't even mention, those all dropped like by 20% too. And so it's really funny to watch people flee this thing that they view as unsafe and then to run to this other thing that's just as volatile, if not more. And so, yeah, it'll be fun to watch as it plays out.
Talk about having no conviction, right? Everybody's solidly behind these virtual currencies until somebody burps. All of a sudden, they're running for the exit. So it's like, yeah, there's not a whole lot of courage of conviction there. I think people are playing the wave, playing the trend.
So in similar crypto news, I found an article in Accounting Today called Treasury Calls for Crypto Transfers Over 10,000 to be reported. And so what's happened is that the U.S. Treasury has said that the Biden administration's proposal to strengthen tax compliance includes a requirement for these transfers to be reported to the IRS. And it says that this is necessary to minimize the incentives and opportunity to shift income out of the new information reporting regime. And so it's kind of like, it's looking at another downside of cryptocurrency, which is that it helps people to commit fraud or other types of crimes. And so the IRS is trying to kind of balance that out by increasing reporting requirements on it. And so I guess I want to get you guys' take on whether or not you think that we'll see increased government regulation on this topic, or if this will continue to be one of those things where it's always going to be a source of issues of, government wanting to regulate this, but not having direct control over it. So what do you guys think? Is this going to be the new big issue? Cryptocurrency transactional reporting?
On one side, it makes sense. It's in line with the cash reporting requirements, right? When businesses have $10,000 in cash transactions, they have to maintain reporting on that. It's called the Form 8300. And so it makes sense that they would try to maybe align the crypto with that. The part that doesn't quite make sense, though, is, and I think what you're alluding to is, how would they ever audit this? I mean, if you didn't report it, how would they ever find out that you didn't report it, right? So it becomes kind of this self-reporting thing where the good actors, or not even necessarily the good ones, but the diligent ones who spend time and money to be in compliance, you're adding to their compliance burden. And the folks who just don't care, you're probably not doing anything to them because they have no way of really tracking this anyway at the moment. And so I think I don't like that aspect of it. And I also don't like, I never like scenarios where the government's trying to regulate something that they actually can't check up on easily, because all it does is it creates this scenario where nobody's following, they have a law in place and nobody's following that law. And when you have a law in place that can't be enforced or isn't being enforced, then it creates this sensibility, for me at least, that the law becomes somewhat arbitrary and capricious, and that's not something any of us want, right? We don't, it's like, well, so at what point do they enforce this? They only enforce it when they're mad at you, right? That's arbitrary and capricious. That's not, if it is a rule, it should be enforced across the board. It shouldn't be something that they just like pile on after they figure out all the other things that they're going after you for, and then they're like, oh, by the way, did you have a $10,000 crypto transaction you didn't report? Let's see if we can figure that out and throw that at you as well, right? When nobody's going to be reporting it. It just, I hate those kind of scenarios. So yeah, I'd say I'm more on the side of they shouldn't do this right now because they don't have a good way to do it right.
I think that's pretty much the take I had on it. I looked at it and I said, well, yeah, that's a great idea because that's the same way for people dealing in cash. But then the next thought was, well, how the heck are you going to do this? This is untraceable. So it's kind of a toothless tiger. And I see it the way you do, Ty. I mean, it's like if they pin somebody down for something else, they'll just keep piling on saying, well, wait a minute, we got this on the books too. And, they'll dig into that. But I agree. I mean, it's wonderful that they want to do this, but they're doing it long before they're in a position to be able to do it. So I'm not quite, it's get your ducks in a row first. I mean, it makes sense that you want to do it that way. And I think, going back to a couple shows again, we kept talking about, the more this gets, treated like mainstream. And I guess from that standpoint, well, they're treating it like mainstream. You can't enforce it, but you're treating it like mainstream. So again, I think that the concept and the idea I don't have a problem with, but I think the enforcement and the rollout and the execution of it's definitely the timing is off. Thank you for joining us for another edition of the None of Our Businesses podcast YouTube channel show. Today's business issues in general, seen through the eyes of three accountants. Tell your family, friends, everybody about us. Hit the like button, spread the word. We appreciate you spending some time with us for this podcast. And we also encourage you to join our sister show, the Profitless on Purpose show, where you can check out Mark, AJ, Lisa, some of the other gang that you used to see on this show. Thank you for joining us. Have a great week, everybody.
Bye, everyone.